Have you ever stood at the edge of something new? Your heart pounding, your mind racing with every possible reason why you shouldn't move forward. Maybe it's a career change, a relationship decision, or a calling you've been ignoring for years. Right now, in this very moment, there's something you're afraid to do, and that fear has kept you frozen in place. But what if I told you that Jesus has a specific message for you today, one that addresses the exact fear that's been holding you back? This isn't just another motivational talk. This is about what the Son of God would whisper directly into your soul if he were standing beside you right now, seeing your hesitation, knowing your doubts, and understanding the battle raging inside you. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might just change everything. Jesus would first remind you that fear is not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's often confirmation that you're exactly where you need to be. When you feel that trembling in your chest, that voice telling you to stay safe, to remain comfortable, he sees it differently. He sees someone standing at the threshold of their purpose, someone whose life is about to expand beyond the limitations they've accepted for so long. The fear you're experiencing isn't your enemy, it's the growing pain of your soul stretching toward its divine design. Jesus knew fear intimately, and in the Garden of Gethsemane, he felt the weight of what lay ahead so intensely that his sweat became like drops of blood. Yet he still chose to move forward because he understood something profound about fear and faith coexisting. He would tell you that the disciples felt this same paralyzing fear when he called them from their boats, their businesses, their comfortable lives into the unknown. Peter was terrified when Jesus told him to step out of the boat and walk on water. Yet it was in that terrifying step that he experienced the miraculous. Jesus didn't rebuke Peter for his fear. He reached out his hand when Peter began to sink, teaching us that even when fear causes us to falter, grace is always within reach. Your next step doesn't require you to have it all figured out. It just requires you to take it while keeping your eyes fixed on him, trusting that his hand will steady you when the waves of uncertainty crash around you. Jesus would remind you of the parable of the talents, where the servant who buried his single talent did so out of fear. That servant didn't lose what he had because he lacked ability or resources. He lost everything because fear convinced him that doing nothing was safer than risking failure. But here's what Jesus wants you to understand. The greatest tragedy isn't in trying and failing. It's in never trying at all because fear whispered lies about your inadequacy. God didn't give you dreams, visions, and desires just to watch you bury them in the ground of what if and maybe someday. Every gift, every calling, every prompting you felt is meant to be invested, multiplied, and used for kingdom purposes, and that requires the courage to act despite the fear. He would tell you that every person in Scripture who did something significant for God's kingdom felt utterly unqualified and afraid. Moses said, "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" Gideon was hiding in a winepress when God called him a mighty warrior. Jeremiah protested that he was only a child. Esther risked her life approaching the king unbidden. Mary faced social disgrace by accepting God's calling. Yet each of these individuals discovered that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Your feelings of inadequacy aren't disqualifications, they're the very context in which God's power shines most brilliantly. Because when you succeed despite your limitations, everyone knows it wasn't by your strength alone. Jesus would gently challenge the narrative you've been telling yourself about why you can't take the next step. Maybe you've convinced yourself you're too old, too young, too inexperienced, too broken, too poor, or too late. But he would point to the woman at the well, whose past was filled with failed relationships, yet became an evangelist to her entire town. He would remind you of Zacchaeus, the despised tax collector who climbed a tree and came down transformed, using his wealth for redemption rather than exploitation. He would show you Paul, who persecuted Christians before becoming Christianity's greatest advocate. None of these people were perfect candidates. They were available candidates. And availability plus God's ability equals limitless possibility. He would ask you a piercing question. What are you really afraid of? Is it failure? Or is it actually success and the responsibility that comes with it? Is it rejection? Or is it acceptance and the vulnerability of being truly seen? Is it the unknown, or is it discovering that you're capable of far more than you've been willing to admit? Sometimes we hide our fear behind practical concerns like timing, resources, or circumstances. But Jesus sees through those surface excuses to the deeper fear underneath. He would invite you to name that fear honestly, to bring it into the light where its power begins to diminish, because fear thrives in the shadows of our unexamined thoughts. Jesus would tell you that faith isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to move forward despite it. When he walked toward his crucifixion, he didn't do so because he felt no fear, but because he loved you more than he feared the suffering. That's the model he's offering you now. Not a life without fear, but a life where love, purpose, and obedience outweigh the fear. You don't need to wait until you feel brave. Bravery is forged in the firmness of action taken while afraid. Every step you take toward your calling while fear whispers doubt is an act of worship, a declaration that you trust God more than you trust your fear. He would remind you that the enemy of your soul uses fear as his primary weapon because he knows what you're capable of in Christ. Satan doesn't bother tempting people who are living far below their potential. He reserves his fiercest attacks for those who are on the verge of breakthrough. The intensity of your fear might actually be proportional to the significance of what you're about to do, and the enemy knows that if he can keep you paralyzed, he can keep you ineffective. But Jesus has already defeated that enemy, and the same resurrection power that raised Christ from the dead lives in you, which means you have access to supernatural courage that transcends natural circumstances. Jesus would tell you about the cost of obedience, yes, but also about the far greater cost of disobedience. When you refuse to take the next step, you're not just staying where you are, you're actively moving backward in your spiritual journey. Comfort zones have a way of shrinking over time, and what feels safe today becomes a prison tomorrow. Every time you choose fear over faith, you're training your spirit to default to retreat rather than advance, and that pattern becomes increasingly difficult to break. But here's the beautiful truth. Every time you choose courage over comfort, you're building spiritual muscle that makes the next step easier, creating a momentum of faith that carries you further than you ever imagined possible. He would point to the woman with the issue of blood who pushed through the crowd despite her fear of being exposed as unclean. She risked public humiliation, possible punishment, and certain rejection. Yet Jesus stopped for her, healed her, and called her daughter. Your next step might require you to push through your own crowd of doubts, naysayers, and limiting beliefs. But Jesus is waiting to meet you in that place of courageous action. He doesn't stand at a distance calling you forward, he walks with you. And sometimes the miraculous happens not after you arrive, but during the journey itself, in the very act of moving forward. Jesus would tell you that perfect conditions don't exist, and waiting for them is just another form of fear disguising itself as wisdom. If you're waiting to feel ready, you'll wait forever, because readiness is something you discover in motion, not in preparation. The Israelites didn't cross the Jordan River after the waters parted. The priests had to step into the rushing waters first, and only then did God hold back the river. Your miracle is on the other side of your obedient action, not before it. God is not asking you to see the entire staircase. He's asking you to take the first step, and he'll illuminate the next one as you go. He would remind you of his promise in Isaiah, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you." Notice it says when, not if. Challenges are guaranteed, but so is his presence. You're not stepping into the unknown alone. You're stepping into the company of the one who knows all things, sees all things, and has already prepared the way before you. The same Jesus who told the storm to be still has authority over every storm you'll face. And sometimes he calms the storm, but more often he calms you in the middle of the storm while developing your faith. Jesus would tell you that your next step doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone whose life you're meant to touch. Somewhere, someone is waiting for the testimony you'll gain from this step, the wisdom you'll acquire, the breakthrough that will inspire them to take their own step. When you let fear hold you back, you're not just robbing yourself of destiny, you're delaying breakthrough for others who need what only you can offer. Your obedience creates a ripple effect that extends far beyond your immediate circumstances, touching lives and generations you may never meet, but who desperately need the example of your courage. He would address the lie that you have time, that you can take this step later when you feel more prepared. But tomorrow is promised to no one, and the opportunity standing before you today may not be available next year. There's a divine timing to God's promptings, a specific season for specific actions, and missing that season can mean missing the fullness of what God intended. This doesn't mean you should act rashly or without wisdom, but it does mean that prolonged hesitation rooted in fear is not the same as patient waiting rooted in faith and preparation. Jesus would tell you about the joy that awaits on the other side of obedience. Yes, the step is scary, but the regret of never taking it is far more painful. He would paint a picture of your future self, the person you're becoming, the life you're building, the impact you're making, and he would ask if that vision is worth confronting today's fear. He would remind you that every person you admire, every faith hero you respect, every testimony that moves you began with someone feeling exactly what you feel right now, but choosing faith anyway. He would whisper to your heart that you're not just taking a step, you're stepping into partnership with him. This isn't about your strength, your wisdom, or your resources. It's about his infinite power working through your willing vessel. When you feel weak, he is strong. When you lack direction, he provides guidance. When you run out of resources, he supplies what you need. The pressure isn't on you to make it all work. The pressure is on you to take the step and watch him make the impossible possible. Jesus would remind you that he specializes in using unlikely people in unexpected ways to accomplish unimaginable things. Nothing about your story disqualifies you. In fact, your unique combination of experiences, struggles, and victories positions you perfectly for what he's calling you to do. Stop comparing your beginning to someone else's middle, and stop using other people's journeys as excuses for not starting your own. God has a specific plan for your life that fits you like a custom-made garment, and no one else can fulfill it the way you can. He would tell you that the fear you're feeling is actually evidence that you're alive, that you're engaged with life at a level that matters, that you haven't settled for the numb existence of playing it safe. Fear is the price of admission to a life of significance, and those who never feel fear are often those who never attempt anything meaningful. But fear should be an advisor, not a dictator. It can inform your decisions, but shouldn't make them. Let faith be the loudest voice in the room, the deciding vote, the compass that points you toward purpose. Jesus would address the practical concerns you have, the money, the time, the people involved, and remind you that he's the God who multiplied 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed thousands. He's the God who made a path through the Red Sea, who brought water from a rock, who extended daylight so a battle could be won. Your practical limitations are the very stage on which he loves to demonstrate his provision, and your neediness is your greatest asset when it positions you in total dependence on him. He would tell you that doubt and faith can coexist, and having questions doesn't disqualify you from taking the step. The father who brought his son to Jesus said, "I believe, help my unbelief," and Jesus didn't reject him for his honesty. You can take the next step while still having doubts, while still working through questions, while still feeling uncertain about the outcome. What matters is not the perfection of your faith, but the object of your faith. And when Jesus is that object, even faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. Jesus would remind you of his words in Revelation, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." He's not going to kick the door down or force his way into your decision. He's inviting, prompting, waiting for you to open the door and step through. The next step you fear is that door, and He's on the other side of it, waiting to lead you into the abundant life He promised. The life that's available not after you die, but starting right now, in this moment, with this decision. He would tell you that courage isn't something you're born with, it's something you develop through repeated acts of obedience. Every time you choose faith over fear, you're building a history with God, a testimony of His faithfulness that becomes the foundation for the next step and the one after that. You're creating evidence for yourself that He can be trusted, that His promises are true, that stepping out in faith leads to breakthrough, growth, and transformation even when it also leads through difficulty. Jesus would gently but firmly tell you that the time for contemplation has passed and the time for action has arrived. He's equipped you, prepared you, called you, and now He's waiting for you to move. The next step won't take itself, and faith without works is dead. He's asking you to partner your belief with your behavior, to let your actions demonstrate the trust you claim to have, to stop merely talking about faith and start walking it out in practical, tangible ways that require you to depend on Him. He would tell you that you were created for this moment, born for this purpose, shaped by every experience you've had, both good and bad, to be ready for what's ahead. Your past hasn't disqualified you, it's prepared you. Your struggles haven't weakened you, they've strengthened you. Your fears haven't eliminated your calling, they've confirmed it. And now, right now, Jesus is saying the same thing He said to the paralyzed man: rise, take up your bed and walk. It's time to move. The question isn't whether you'll face fear, it's whether you'll let fear define your future. Jesus is inviting you today to take that next step, whatever it is, wherever it leads, trusting that His hand will steady you and His grace will sustain you. If this message resonated with your spirit, if you feel that divine nudge pushing you toward action, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel for more spiritual encouragement, and drop a comment below telling me what next step you're committing to take this week. Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own courage. Let's build a community of people who choose faith over fear, action over hesitation, and obedience over comfort. Remember, you're not alone in this journey, and the same Jesus who spoke courage into the hearts of His disciples 2,000 years ago is speaking that same courage into your heart right now.